Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We broadcast 2 hours from the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Kyle's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. If you would like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. The listen line? 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. You know, I said this before, but I believe it bears repeating. I believe that this broadcast classroom, our students and our instructors, are the best and brightest that there is. I am the most fortunate person on the planet to be associated with this broadcast classroom and those who are participating in it, both as students and as instructors. Everyone involved, everyone, volunteers. We even have radio stations that charge for airtime, and that's the way radio stations generate some of the revenue. But we're on the air on radio stations that don't charge us. None of us gets paid. There's no exchange of funds in any direction. The instructors don't get paid. The radio stations don't get paid. The networks that carry us don't get paid. I don't get paid. It is just the most wonderful experience to be associated with all of you. I get calls from people all over the world, and they hear things in my voice, and they think they know that, you know, things are different with me. And they'll call me, and they'll offer their advice and opinions, and they'll help me with everything you could possibly imagine. George in New Hampshire's with us today, and he's one of those men who listens to USA Prepares, and he's called in a number of times, and I like him so much I've invited him to be an instructor. And that's the kind of thing that happens. Miles in Australia. Miles calls me all the time. Miles gives me all kinds of advice and counsel. Joey in Michigan, Rich Sheben, Lauren in Ohio, Mike Parsons, Ron Gibson. Ron Gibson volunteers his time and puts us on YouTube every day. David Klotz is an activist. He's been standing up against the Chinese factory outlet. Gets beat up regularly for doing it. Gets fired. It has a dramatic impact on his financial well-being, as with many of the rest of us. Mike Ma in Guatemala. Jack the Marine in Missouri. And the list goes on and on and on. I just, it brings a tear to my eye. Literally. George, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you, Vincent, and I appreciate the opportunity.
George, you, as I mentioned, you've listened, and can you share, a little bit about your experience and your background before we talk about, some weapons that are absolutely silenced, quiet weapons, silenced weapons, things that have been in history, things that are perfectly legal to use today. We're not talking about breaking the law or violating any codes. We're just talking about history and what happened and what's still available to us. But please share with us a little bit about who George in New Hampshire is.
All right, Vince. Vince, I'll tell you, there's some parallels between our lives I found. We both have mothers who are in their 90s, thank God. So, God willing, those longevity genes are going to be passed down to us. And I'll tell you, we were raised at a time where I can see that our parents, our communities, our country made an investment in us. And our education, the community, even the television programming was healthy. You know, it was reinforcing family values, reinforcing morality, me. And I remember a special code they had on television. They called it the television code, that they said you'd never see a criminal held up in respect. And you'd never see certain things that, I don't remember the whole code because it was a long time ago. But in other words, we were nurtured. And you can see that in our lives. I can see the investment that was made in us, and you can see that in our own diverse ways, each one of us, we all have experience in this world. And our experience counts, because I don't see all the things that you did, nor vice versa. But it says one man sharpens another, and that goes for a woman as well. And we can sharpen each other, and we can help each other when we can grow. And again, what I especially like, and I've been attracted to, and I feel compatible with your program, and I'm sure the vast listening audience would also agree, is that you're for positive change, for strengthening, building up, not tearing down, not holding something up that is like a mirage that's going to promise something, and then when you get there, you find out that basically you're just scooping sand into your mouth and you're choking on it, and you're the worse for it. So I won't go on and on. I'll just say that I was born in the early 50s, and we're about a year apart in age, but what I found is that I think we've seen the best, and if present trends continue, we might see the worst. And I served my country. I volunteered, like John Regan, Captain John. I served in the Air Force. I was in security service. I believe he was too, and I was a Russian interpreter. And it was my age was such that the Vietnam War was coming to an end, but they weren't sure how soon. But this was, like I say, just before the mid-'70s. So I've had experiences in my life where I've worked for the Postal Service, and I'll even tell you this, we have another thing in common. I even worked for Sears Roebuck. That was my first job outside of high school. And I can tell you a story for another time, but it'll bring a chuckle to you. And anyway, like I said, I've been around. I've held various jobs in federal, state, and local government. I don't have as much experience as some, but I have more experience in others in other ways. And because of my position in life and certain things that have happened to me, you know and I know, life happens. Whether it's a bad accident, whether it's things, the longer you live on this earth, you see more, and you grow more, and you tend, when you reach a certain point, I can see, I can't speak for you, Vincent, but I think we've mellowed enough where we try to get along as much as we can, but at the same time, we increasingly don't put up with a lot of nonsense either. Am I correct?
You're absolutely correct. I would prefer to avoid a fight, but that does not mean that I'm going to run from a fight. If it's better for me to avoid it, I will. But for example, there's a situation where the government is coming after our family, and I'm digging in. All I have to do is capitulate. All I have to do is say, sure, how much do you want? Is that enough? Can we give you any more just to go away? Absolutely not. I'm not giving them anything because they don't deserve it. They have no right to it. I know the code, and I'm not going to yield. I absolutely am not going to yield. I am digging in and preparing for the attack. So that's how I am. But am I looking for a fight? Absolutely not. But when one comes brought to my door, and these guys threaten my family, they've got to fight. And I guess that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes. Well, there's a code. In other words, you want to treat people the way you would like to be treated. And you know that there are certain lines that are drawn. They're invisible lines, but you don't cross those lines, which means if I come to your door, I present myself like a gentleman, knock on the door. I treat you, I treat Mrs. Finelli and your family with respect. And in kind, I hope that, and I know in your case, but I'm saying, in other words, you've taught your children, as I've striven to teach mine, that you treat people with respect. But at the same time, unfortunately, there are people who look upon kindness or good nature as weakness, and the two aren't compatible.
very, very good point. I had a chat with someone I met, and I said that he was trying to understand some of my values. And I mentioned to him that I believe that it's important for us to take care of our family, take care of our friends, take care of our neighbors, when we can, directly, one-on-one. So if you've got a neighbor that's falling down and you can help pick them up, whether it be help them financially, help them with food, help them with ideas, help them lift the other end of that heavy load, whatever it is, it's important to do that without saying, okay, let me just write this down because I need to make note that I helped you and then you owe me. Without doing, that balance sheet, without doing that account, that T account, just help people because it's the right thing to do without looking toward any compensation, reward at all, just because it's the right thing to do. And kind of like what you were talking about with television and the values. And as you were mentioning television programs of when we were growing up in the 1950s, there were programs that had, let's just talk about Superman. Superman was the guy who was on the side of the right. He was the guy who did the right thing. He was the guy that righted the wrongs. He was the guy that protected those that needed protecting. Leave It to Beaver, family values. They had a family friend who was always getting in trouble, Eddie Haskell. Eddie Haskell was, kind of a mischievous guy in a, lighthearted way. But when he went wrong, he was called into check, and it was explained on TV what he did wrong, why he did it wrong, and why it had to be righted. And those were kind of the training things that we would see over and over and over. And we were told in school to do the right thing. And you didn't see the bad guys winning like you do today. You see bad guys winning. You see bad guys taking advantage of good people. You see people being bopped onto the concrete, thrown down by bad people, and then it ends without being righted. And that's wrong. George in New Hampshire, and I'll be right back. George in New Hampshire is with us. George, I'd like to share a short story with you. I made a new friend, an absolutely wonderful man. His name is Mark. I'm not going to share his last name at this point because he hasn't joined the faculty yet, but he might. And so here's what happened. As many of you know, I'm working. Bruce Kay and I are building our battery banks, and we've redesigned our solar systems, and it's really kind of interesting. We're doing it very frugally, and we're going to share these results with you as we build out and do some welding and fabrication. So I stopped off at this I-44 equipment company, and they have steel shelving, commercial steel shelving. Now, this is the kind of shelving that if you go into Sam's Club, you see these racks that you could literally park a car on, right? I mean, it's that heavy. I'm not talking about homeowner type shelving that you might have in your garage with a few cans of oil on it. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this really heavy steel shelving that you see at Lowe's, Home Depot, Sam's, Walmart. And I needed to mount these or place these batteries, these nickel iron batteries that weigh 4,000 pounds roughly on a shelf. So I needed a shelf that would hold 4,000 pounds. And it needed to be a fairly substantial shelf, but I didn't want to spend thousands of dollars on it. So I went to this man's business. And so he took me around the entire lot. He showed me everything he had. He showed me some of the tricks of the trade. He showed me how it would interlock. He spent easily an hour with me, showing me, in the old-fashioned way, customer service. Then he took me inside his building that he built, and he showed me how he buys posts and sands them and welds them, and how he was engineering his expansion of his building. And he took a lot of time with me. And I went there yesterday. I called him up and I said, okay, I'd like to buy these pieces. I'd like to start with a small purchase, just this one rack that'll hold 4,000 pounds. And I said I'd be back, in a day or so. And so I called him and I said, I'll be there. He had it all mounted on a pallet, ready to be picked up with his forklift to put on the back of our truck. Now, he went through all that effort just on the belief that I'd actually show up. Now, can you get that done at most other places? I don't think so. I don't think you can, and I don't think that people treat their customers and their new friends that way as often as they should. So kudos to Mark. George, isn't that the way it used to be, but is rare today?
Oh, you know, the old school was, it was done on your word and on a handshake, and your word was your bond and your reputation. And I was raised like that. You were raised like that. That man was, and it's very nice when you meet someone who lives by that same code. And like I said, unfortunately, though, is it doesn't seem to be the case so much anymore.
I wish we could get back to that very, very quickly. And we kind of have that. We kind of have that environment here, where we live in the middle of nowhere, in the on top of this hill or mountain in the Ozarks. We have neighbors who will just show up at, I don't know, 7:30 in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, just show up. And it's like, we're here for coffee. And that's wonderful. You know, I'm racing around getting ready for the broadcast, and Mrs. Finelli's, spending time with the neighbors, and they bring things. They bring tomatoes. They bring cucumbers. They bring lettuce. We go over there. We help them. We help them with whatever they need. If they need their generator fixed, we just take care of it. And it's just the old-fashioned neighborhood, if you will, of the 1950s. So I am fortunate to be living in 1950 right here in Missouri. And it would be very difficult for me to change to a more modern era than where I live right now. I don't want to. I like it just like this.
No, I understand. Unfortunately, I came from a community that was like that. I was raised more in my mother's community. They were Italian, but they had a nice sense of community there. I mean, most people didn't lock their doors, and it's almost like you're talking a fairy tale now when you look at things now. But even where I live now, I was told it had the lowest crime rate in the state. But that's changing too. So,
yesterday I pulled in, and we have some cows, so we closed the gate to the farm. And on the other side of the gate, the U.S. mail guy left a package for me on the other side of the gate. It was wonderful. Rather than me having to run down, a 20-mile round trip to go pick it up, he just left it over the gate. It's the way it used to be. George in New Hampshire's with us. George, we have a regular mail carrier, USPS mail carrier. Wonderful man. And I'm not going to mention his name because he'll probably get fired for what I'm going to say next. Well, if our gate is open, our farm gate, our road is about a third of a mile long on the farm to get to the farmhouse from the dirt road that leads to the farmhouse. And if he has a package that does not fit in the mailbox that is right next to our gate, he will drive his truck, his own personal vehicle that he uses for mail delivery. He'll drive that truck up our driveway, through the potholes, around the bends, and he will bring the package right to our door. And we have a 30-second exchange. I thank him, and then off he goes. And that happens, often. Well, if the gate is closed, what he does is he uses these trash bags, these drawstring trash bags that he buys with his own money. And if it's going to rain, he will put whatever that package is in this trash bag so it doesn't get wet, and he'll tie it to the gate, on the inside of the gate, and then he'll drive off. Well, I bought something from Dr. Bill Deagle, and I got this thing in the mail that said, sorry, we missed you. Go pick your package up tomorrow. And I needed it. It was urgent. And I called the post office, and they said, oh, you got a different driver today. I said, yeah, but the other guy, he drops it off. Just puts it in a bag. What's going on? We can't do that anymore. We're not allowed to do that anymore. I said, well, he does. And so they said, no, packages have been damaged, and we have to pay for them, so we don't do that anymore. We can't. We're not allowed to. So I said, well, I've got to have this. And they said, well, tell you what, hold on, give us your number. We'll call the cell phone of the carrier, and we'll see if if she can meet you somewhere. And she did. She was willing to stop on the side of the road while I raced down the road to pick up this package. Now, that's kind of nice, but I've been informed that the policy has changed. You they're not going to do this kind of stuff anymore. They're not going to wait for you. They are not going to leave your packages the good old-fashioned 1950s way anymore. And that's sad.
Well, I agree, but again, you know and I know, if you're willing to go the distance, especially a letter carrier or a mailman or a mailwoman for that matter, you get to know the people on your route. And after delivering a route for like 15, 20, 25 years, they're almost like a part of extended family where they know the people, they know Mrs. So-and-so needs this, and she's getting a little old, she can't walk down, and they'll go the distance. Now, once in a while, though, you'll get what they call a substitute in who doesn't know their way around, doesn't know the particulars, and they do it, hopefully, by the book. But again, when that phone rings to the supervisor, though, how many people will call up and say, you know, the mailman that came today, you know, he was so nice, he was really good, and you're doing a good job. And when that happens, that's sending a message, and the supervisor has less headaches that way because he's got a happy group of customers. And then you can have the other type of mail carrier who doesn't take the job seriously, doesn't do a good job. Hopefully they're in the minority. And it's like they'll get that phone ringing off the hook with complaints. Now, now I ask you, Vin, which employee would you rather have?
I would rather have the employee that goes above and beyond. But here's something that I've noticed. When we lived in Virginia, my mother-in-law and father-in-law were visiting us from out of state. And they're both white. At the time, they were both white-haired, and they were driving their station wagon, and they got a flat tire on the side of the road, maybe a few miles from our farmhouse, on a paved road, 2 lanes, 1 lane going, 1 lane coming. And so a UPS brown truck pulled over and helped them change the tire. It was absolutely wonderful. And when they got to the farmhouse, when my mother-in-law and father-in-law got to the farmhouse, I said, well, that's really great. Can you describe the UPS driver? Because I know most of them. Because we had a business and, you know, all of them had been to our house at one time or another. And so they described this guy. I know him. So I called him up. And I called him to thank him personally, directly. And I said, I'd like to call your supervisor and just tell him what happened and what you did. And I think it's wonderful. He said, don't do that. I'll get fired. I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to help people on the route. Don't do that. So that's another anomaly in the system. It's like, hey, speed past these guys, get those packages out. That's what we're in the business for. We're not in the business of helping people. We are in the business of package delivery, period.
Well, you know, I will say one thing. One outfit is a private outfit. The other one is a federal outfit. But their names are very close together. And like I said, I was a letter carrier, so I know. And I also worked in a central markup unit. But again, it was really, I've had to go in and clean up other people's messes. And usually with me, I had to clean up my own messes, too, when I was first starting out. You know, the supervisor would send me back. But the point is that, like anything in this world, it takes all kinds to make up a world. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? So what can you say?
You know, at one of the things I remember from Sears, and I don't know if you had this experience, but day one at Sears, I was a automotive mechanic, first job, and during high school. And the automotive mechanical foreman welcomed me, put his arm over my shoulder, said, Vinny, remember this through life. May the job be big or small, do it right or not at all. And he was absolutely right. Because how many times do we have to fix things that we rush through, that if we spent just a little bit more time, it would have been done right the first time, faster, smarter, more efficiently, less cost. But sometimes we just race through it and mess it up. And so I try really hard to do it right the first time and avoid mistakes. And I learned that very young as a teenager. But we don't teach that anymore.
Well, again, too, though, you know and I know that it all is contingent upon who the boss is. Because you have bosses who just want to make the maximum amount of profit. They don't care how they do it. And they tend to force or coerce employees into, you know, putting profit before, you know, giving a good service to the customer. because I know we're not going to get to the other subject because when I'm looking at the time, but that's okay. If it's okay with you, we can save it for another day, which God willing,
Sure.
you know.
Sure.
I'll tell you a Sears story, though. Now, you know and I know, there's different types of... The Sears was the store back in the very early 70s when I was out of high school. So they had this thing where they advertised in the paper they needed people in the distribution center, and they had the distribution center in Boston, and it was right on the trolley line where you'd get off. I think if I drive by now, I think the building's empty, but the last time I looked. But I remember they hired us with the promise that after 30 days you got to join the union. Well, for the next 30 days, they worked us like dogs. They were in that in-between period. It wasn't quite yet the Christmas season, and the summer period was over. So they wanted to get everything cleared out, all in order and everything ready to go. So when Christmas came, you know, basically they had a well-oiled machine going. And I remember that they had us, you know, we'd be everything that Sears carried, we'd be putting into these huge, like caged-in carts, and we'd load them up. And according to the rules, you're only supposed to be pulling one or pushing one. That was it. You one at a time. Well, they had us. I can remember. I was pulling one with one hand, and I'm pushing the other one with the other hand. And they were working us like dogs, but they held in front of us like that magic, you know, that end of the rainbow treasure was you were going to make, after 30 days, you were going to make it in the union. So I remember I got hurt once or twice because I'd have to stop short, and it was a busy area, and they had conveyor belts and all that. I'd have to stop short, and invariably I'd stop one, but the other one would bang in, and I'd be bleeding, so I'd go to the nurse, and the nurse would tell me, "You're not supposed to be doing that, one at a time." I said, "Well, you know, Tony down here is telling me I got to do..." "Well, you tell Tony that I said that, you know, this is a public safety hazard." So, okay. So then, all of a sudden, one of my friends would look at me and say, "George, my 30th day is tomorrow. I joined the union." And they were paying more than, I think it was $150 in 1971. And that was pretty good money back then, a week, especially for young guys starting out. Well, anyway, long story short, next day, I didn't see him. So then another man told me something. And so one day I inquired with the supervisor, and I said, "Well, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so." I said, "I don't see him anymore. I don't see him down the cafeteria." I said, he told me, he says, "Oh, don't you realize, as soon as you join the union, you get to pick what department you work in." I was about 17 and a half, you know, going on 18. What did I know? So, lo and behold, finally one day, my 30th day comes. I put my coat on. It's getting a little colder, early November. I'm going on my way. Well, I realized I forgot my gloves, so I come back. So I see the older supervisor, you know, Tony. "Oh, I was looking for you." So he takes me to the office, sits me down. He goes, "Well, you know, Sears has had some reverses lately and this and that, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to lay you off." This was like the 29th day. So then, like an idiot, I reached out my hand to shake his hand. I said, "Well, it was nice to be affiliated with Sears." And then it finally dawns on me, as I'm walking out the door, why I never saw anybody after the 29th day. So Sears could be a cutthroat operation, too. But again, it all was contingent. But, you know, I always remembered that. And like I said, whenever I was in a Sears store, you know, I'd always sympathize. I'd get to talk. I said, "I used to work for this company." And they usually took some compassion on me. You know, I wasn't looking for it, but they'd give me a break on whatever was fine. You know, but it was funny. I couldn't help it. It was one of those things. But that's a life lesson, you know.
It absolutely is, and they lied to you about, you know, these guys picking their department. I mean, it's kind of an outrage. It really is. But the Sears that I worked at, I didn't see that. Maybe that's because we were all greasy in the, you know, not everybody wanted to work in the department that I was in, and you were in a rough one too. It was, you know, under cars and dust, dirt, and grease, and but you know, I did learn a lot of lessons from Sears, and it was a different store back then. From the retail perspective, it was customer satisfaction. They wanted to have customers. They didn't want to beat them up like United Airlines does. We'll be right back. George in New Hampshire is with us. George, why don't we see if we can talk about silent weapons in the last segment?
Sure.
What do you think?
All right. Well, what I wanted to talk about today was air guns, pellet guns. Now, a lot of people, you and I discussed this once before, between ourselves, that the Lewis and Clark expedition carried a fairly sophisticated air gun musket, and it so impressed the tribes that they encountered in their exploring that vast Louisiana purchase for President Jefferson had authorized the expedition, that they were amazed that they could just reach out and hit something at a distance where it was quiet, there was no smoke, it was powerful, and they couldn't quite understand its mechanism operation. So for them, it was virtually magic. Now, since that time, it became mass-produced by the late 1800s, and they had places like eventually Daisy took over, mass-produced, which most of us are probably familiar with, is the Daisy air rifle, or the one that you had to pump up numerous times, and then you'd be able to shoot a pellet or a BB down the road. Well, they've come a long way since that time.
I still have mine.
Okay.
I still have mine. The Crossman, the Benjamin, and the Daisy BB guns, yeah.
Well,
yep,
Crossman, right. Well, Crossman and Benjamin are still going strong. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it has been contracted overseas to places like China, but there are still European manufacturers. A number of guns are still made here, but they're in the more higher price ranges. Now, the one, in this day and age where .22 long rifle ammunition is scarce for whatever reason and is ever increasing in price when you do find it, it's roughly probably 5 to 6 cents around the best you could find it nowadays. And it goes up to maybe as much as maybe like 10 cents around, maybe a little more. Now, because .22 ammunition is scarce, and most of the time people who have laid in a little supply, or they find it, they want to basically just use it staggeringly and very, carefully, because they don't know when they're going to find another box of it and what price they're going to have to pay. Hence, what comes in now is air rifles. Now, they have air rifles today. Some are made with, they call them spring piston air rifles. And these you can be found anywhere from $80 on up to, you could go as high as you want. You could go to $1,000 if you want, depending on the workmanship, the craftsmanship, and fitting and all the rest of it. It just like cars. You can either buy yourself a Ford Fiesta, or you could buy yourself a Mercedes-Benz top of the line, and all points in between. Now, the calibers that I'd recommend with these, and these generally will go somewhere between 700, 800, 900, even 1,000 feet per second, with a single stroke of, they call them break barrels. And what a break barrel is it's the rifle where the barrel will come down, you'll grab the end of the muzzle, you'll hit it usually with the palm of your hand with just a little force just to break it open, and then you start it in its arc and you bring it down almost to a 90-degree angle, and that's the cocking effort. Now, there's calibers that are the most popular today are the 177 caliber, or for our metric listeners, 4.5 centimeters, or 22 caliber, or 5.5. Now, these are the ones that you could commonly go into a sporting goods store, a big box store, whatever, where have you, a gun shop, and you can find this in, usually they come in tins of 250, 500 pellets. Now, the nice thing, okay, I hear they are.
Just finish up. We got about 20 seconds.
Okay. Well, the nice thing with pellets is that they're very inexpensive. They're basically roughly a penny a piece, although you can pay more for more sophisticated pellets. And for 500 pellets, 500 shots, you basically can spend just a little over $5. And they're numerous, they're accessible, and they're available.
And it'd be $50 to $75 if you bought 22 caliber plinking ammo to do the same thing. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. George, thanks so much for joining the faculty, for being with us, contributing your time, and sharing your experience. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Kyle Harris is with us for this hour. We're going to be talking about things that we do, clever ways to save money. But Kyle, welcome. Welcome, Kyle. How are you?
Oh, good morning, Vince.
You know, Kyle, I'm looking at the news, and I think we need to share this and then get started with our planned discussion. The Washington Examiner, getting ready. Here's the headline, getting ready. Pentagon to protect electric grid from massive attack. It goes on to say, amid warnings that North Korea and Iran have plans to take out parts of the U.S. electric grid through a cyber attack or atmospheric nuclear blast, the Pentagon is taking steps to protect both the nation's communication and power lifeline. Now, a little late for that. It's a little late to turn on some kind of a system to protect us. It should have been done during the bungling Obama regime. But this is not something that can be done very, very quickly. It'll take a long time to protect the grid. But it says DARPA, DARPA's focus is on thwarting a cyber attack. Well, that's good. And it says that North Korea and Iran could attack the grid with an atmospheric nuclear explosion over the East Coast that will disable the grid and could lead up to 90% death of those in the East. Is that true? Absolutely, it is true, because we will be paralyzed. The grid, if the grid goes down, medicine stops, the internet stops. It can be run for a while on batteries, but how do you go to Walmart? How do you go to a store and buy something when the people at the registers don't know the prices, and they can't take currency because they don't know how to make change, and they can't take credit cards because the grid's down. I mean, there's so many things that could happen. We're talking about food. We're talking about everything stopping should this happen. And is it possible? Yes. Matt Stein, USA Prepares senior instructor, and Rick Miller have been warning about this for years. Matt Stein has said, for the cost of one lousy B-1 bomber that blows things up, we could protect ourselves. For the cost of one of those, we could protect the grid. But nope, we don't do that. We've got the most ignorant Congress money can buy. Shame on all of them. And Kyle, I have been... even though there's this euphoria that we've got Donald Trump, a businessman, as CEO right now, running the show, even though things are on the upswing, I still have not sat on my laurels. I am preparing now more than ever. As a matter of fact, right after the broadcast, I'm going to be installing the batteries, the new batteries that I bought for my solar system, so that, we are even better prepared. So in lieu of vacations, in lieu of squandering money, in lieu of doing, wasteful things that, are gratifying instantly, like, well, how many ways can you waste money? Plenty. I'm putting my effort, my energy, my wherewithal, my whatever strength I have left, and my money into survival. I have not changed a thing.
Yep. Vince, I could not agree. And people that, and I had this worry, I was cautiously optimistic with Donald Trump, like I said on the air before. It's just one of those things, and look at what we have done, even though he's been in office, just not even 100 days yet. We've already used the biggest bomb that's non-nuclear in Afghanistan. We've already poked Russia and Syria in the eye, which one of the main reasons, I'm sure, that you and I both voted for Donald Trump is we did not want to go to war with Russia. We did not want more intervention in Syria. We just wanted them to concentrate on ISIS and get rid of them. Just to stop the warmongering and go after them and get rid of them and be done with it. It's just it's just ridiculous to me. And now that we see that somehow every person that tends to get in that office somehow is either brought in and given a comeuppance or co-opted in some manner. You know what I mean? It just to me, he's done some good things. Don't get me wrong; I'm not totally disappointed with him, but man, one of the main things we definitely don't need with a completely unprotected grid is to be poking Russia and North Korea and China and everybody else in the eye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and during the Obama administration, they were talking about all these wonderful things like shovel-ready projects. What the heck were they? Were they painting? What were they doing that was so important, that was more important than protecting our power grid, which is the lifeline for all of us, including those ignorant Congress critters and government bureau rats.
Yeah. I heard Newt Gingrich one time, and I can't remember on what program I was listening to him, but he was purporting, getting this done in a hurry. But even he was saying that it would take at least 2 years to do this project. If we were to get after it by his own, figuring, it would take 2 years to do this if we were to get after it and get it done. But to me, I mean, I can't imagine these huge big cutouts is what they are. They're like a huge fuse, for lack of a better term. They're glass, enclosed glass thing, and anyway, they would blow up in case of a power surge. That would be like they would just blow these huge fuses, and you could have them installed, and ready to go, but have them on hand. I mean, but anyway. It's kind of ridiculous to me that you could have a fuse that might cost, even if it costs $5,000, I don't care, rather than these huge transformers that you have to move in pieces and reassemble and take years to install. It's just amazing to me.
I got a call from Miles in Europe yesterday, and we were talking about something akin to this. And I said, Miles, here's something that we do here at the farm. And it relates. There's some value in this class, and you may want to consider doing some more study on this. Miles had done some study previously on this, and he said, yeah, he read about that, a while back. And I'm thinking years when he's saying a while back. But here it is. So we have these, and the grid is very similar to this in concept. We have this electric fence. And we've got them all over the property. And what happens is these electric fences are made out of, think of it like a polyester ribbon. And embedded in this ribbon are 6 stainless steel wires woven in this ribbon. So we can unroll this electric fence tape, which is 1/8 of a mile long per section. And we unroll it, and it's suspended about 2.5, 3 feet in the air. And the cows, when it's electrified with a pulse of electricity, the cows, will sense that electricity. And once they get shocked in the nose, they go, I don't think I want to do that again. So they learn very quickly. So they stay away from the fence, and it kind of is a nice way to, it doesn't cut them up with barbed wire. But they see it, it's white, they recognize it, they respect it, and they stay where we'd like them to stay for their own safety. Well, in the case of lightning, lightning can hop on this fence tape, or this fence wire, travel in either direction, ultimately hit the fence charger and blow it up. Literally, it explodes. The capacitors explode, the electronics explode, and some of these chargers are $100, some are $200, some are $300. So they're, we really don't like to have these things getting blown up. So we experimented with something. What we did was we took the end of the fence wire and let it fall down toward the ground, and then do a U-turn upward toward the fence charger, and then travel just a short distance to the fence charger. Then the fence charger is plugged into typically a 120-volt outlet. And when the fence charger would get hit by, or the fence would get hit by lightning, lightning would travel along this fence tape, go to the fence charger, blow it up, and then take out other electronic equipment in the house or in the barn or wherever the closest electronic equipment was. So it wasn't just one piece of gear getting destroyed, it was many pieces. So by putting this loop in the fence tape so that the lightning would be directed downward toward the ground, what would happen is the lightning would go to the ground because it's lazy. It doesn't like making U-turns and going back up to the fence charger. So that's just a thought. What do you think about that?
That's brilliant, Vince. I love your simple fixes that are just excellent. You know, and most people don't realize that, you know, the reason that lightning will blow things up when it hits a fence charger or the lines or anything like that is because there's almost no amperage in lightning. It has a huge amount of voltage, and so it has the potential to jump gaps. Like you just brought your wire down there, it'll jump that gap. But if it doesn't have that to do, it runs into the whatever it is, your capacitors or your little electronic equipment or anything, TVs, whatever there is, and it won't trip breakers because it's such high voltage but very low amperage. Mm-hmm. But it'll still blow up electronic equipment unless you have some kind of a surge protector device on it, which will handle the higher voltage. But anyway, that is just a great idea. You know, and piggybacking on what George was saying too about the pellet guns that he was just talking about there, I thought that was, you know, as far as survival goes, that's just a brilliant idea. And I've picked up 2 or 3 of those little pellet rifles in 17 up to 22 caliber at gun shows from anywhere, if the stock is kind of rough or something like that, you know, for anywhere from $25 to $35. I think 35 is the most I've ever spent on one of them. And they'll push a 177 caliber pellet, you know, about 800-900 feet. Some of them will do 1,000, but the ones that I get kind of cheap, I'll push it about 800 or 900 feet per second. And they're Chinese made, and it takes a special kind of oil. You can't use motor oil on the seal, the plunger seal of them. You use a special kind of oil to oil them. But they work extremely well, and the ones that I have now, I went through 4 or 5 of them, but the ones that I have now, a couple, 3 of them, are quite accurate, you know, out to about 25 yards or thereabouts, you know.
Hold that thought. Going into a break. Kyle Harris is with us in Montana. Class, we thought we'd do something a little lighter today, and we'd talk about saving some money. Kyle Harris in Montana and I are both very frugal guys. So, Kyle, let me share this story with you, and we can take turns teaching how to save money. So, I was looking at the dishwasher last night, got up in the middle of the night, and I thought, what's with this lower dishwasher rack? We bought a General Electric dishwasher off the floor at one of those big box stores. And I think what happened is somebody bought it and said, you know, they were going to install it, and they decided, they'd return it. So it was unused, but it was a little bit banged up, just a little bit. And so it was probably half price. So I bought it. It had the, you know, minimum configuration that I liked. It wasn't really complicated. And I installed it. But the darn thing, the lower rack, is rusting. It's rusting where the large dishes are always put in the same place, and they're the heavier dishes, and it just wore through the vinyl, and the metal wire rack beneath it is rusting. So I got on the internet and went to eBay, $80-something for one that's, you know, really cheesy, but that's really not the right one. The right one, $131 for the right rack. And I thought, that's crazy. I only spent like a little more than twice that for the whole dishwasher. You know, why would I spend that much for the rack? So I decided to do some investigation, and I found you can fix them. You can get a vinyl repair kit, and it's like a tube of liquid vinyl, like a whiteout, a little bottle, 1-ounce bottle of whiteout, and a little brush on it, and you can just take off the piece that's rusted, and you can rebrush with this liquid vinyl, and 24 hours later, it's cured and hardened, and you're back in business. Now, what does that cost? $6.99 shipped from eBay. I love it. Yep. And so I'm going to order that, and I'm going to fix that darn dishwasher before it gets any worse. Not that it's really bad, but, you know, a stitch in time saves 9, right? So that's just one little tip. So for $7, class, you can fix that $131 rusted rack on the bottom of your dishwasher. Yep.
You know, Vince, those the dishwasher racks and a lot of other things that have come out, with this vinyl coating over the top of the wire. I literally hate them things too, because just like you, they tend to somehow crack when you put very much weight on them. They expose them to hardly any heat, and they tend to crack. And then as soon as they crack, even if you don't notice it, the water gets inside of there. So one of the things I would suggest before you put that on there is to pull that rack plumb out of there and put it in the oven so that it's just real low heat, and make sure that the water that has seeped in between the vinyl and the metal has gone away before you apply the vinyl coating to seal it again. But
you're absolutely right. And you know what I think I'll do? I think I'll do that and something else. What I'm going to do is run the dishwasher probably 2 rinse cycles, to get any of the detergent that I can off the rack that is, between the metal and the vinyl, and then put it in the sun outside, bake it in the sun, maybe put something black underneath it so that it gets even a little bit warmer but doesn't melt the vinyl. I think that would work great.
Yep, as long as you don't leave it out overnight, so that the condensation gets on it. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you have a tip you want to share?
Oh, well, it's just a bunch of little things, that a guy does. I was just thinking about them, caulk tubes. Have you ever handled caulk tubes, Vince, where you use about a third of the caulk is all you need, and then you try to stick a screw in it or something like that. Well, what I've learned to do, and it works really good for me, is I'll get a great big wire nut, electrical wire nut, and I'll screw it onto the end of the caulk tube to be able to seal that up, rather than a screw or something, because the screws, for some reason, don't seem to work very good for me. I've used those for a long time, and I've just kind of given up on them and went to a large wire nut. Usually a blue one works really well, the large blue wire nuts. But anyway, that's just one little tiny tip.
Something else you can do is you can, once you use that caulk tube, you can wrap it with like a saran wrap to prevent air from getting to it. You can prevent more air from getting to it, and it would stay more pliable longer. Because for me, I don't always use those darn things. When I need them, I've got them here. But I want to use it 6 months or a year later and still have it work. I don't want to throw it away because it's too hard, and it's set up. So you're right. You're absolutely right. Kyle and I'll be right back. We're going to save you some money. Kyle Harris is with us, and we're saving you money. Kyle, I got up in the middle of the night last night, and I was in the kitchen, and I was looking at the way I wired the kitchen outlets on the kitchen countertop. And I remember reading the code, the National Electric Code, when we built this house about 12 years ago. And I wanted to do it according to code, not because I wanted to, go along with the regulations, but because I thought the code was right. I thought that, I'm certainly willing to take an alternate path if I think there's a better one, but I thought the code was right. So we wired this house according to code. Actually, greater, we exceeded the code. And here's what I'd like to share. So the National Electric Code says that if you're going to have kitchen countertop outlets, they are required to be at minimum 2 feet spacing. And the reason for that is your toaster probably has a really short cord. Your electric mixer probably has a really short cord. Your griddle has a really short cord. And that's so you don't burn the cords on the appliances. And it's a good idea. And the last thing you want to do is use an undersized extension cord to run your toaster or the griddle or these high wattage devices. So what I did was I placed the outlets every 2 feet according to code or closer. But I did something a little different. So the first outlet, let's start on the left side of the counter, for example. The first outlet would be circuit number 1. The outlet to the right of that, the very next outlet would be a different circuit, a different 20 amp circuit. And then the next outlet, the third one in the series, would be back to the first circuit. And then the next one would be the second circuit. So I had 2 circuits on the counter, and I alternated circuits so that, for example, if I had a toaster plugged into the first outlet and a crock pot plugged into the next outlet right next to it, they'd be on 2 separate circuits, and I would not be overheating the wiring in the wall. and they would not trip the circuit breaker. So I wanted to share that with our class, that if you are at a point where you're going to do some new wiring, you may want to consider doing it that way. Your thoughts, Kyle?
Oh, absolutely, Vince. You know, when I used to wire houses years ago, and when I had my own business doing this, you know, code would allow me to run one circuit to, depending on the size of the bedroom and the amount of outlets and lights in the room, I could have used one circuit for 2 bedrooms. But I decided I didn't want to do that, because just in case you had somebody that was real cold-blooded and they needed a space heater, and the 2 people in 2 different rooms would put space heaters on there, I knew that they were going to be tripping that breaker. So I would pull one circuit to every bedroom, and every bedroom would have its own circuit. It was overbuilt, but, you know, I got a lot of business by word of mouth. And, you know, I just would do it. I do it over just like I would do it if I would be in my room, you know, if I was building my own house. The other thing that people do, Vince, and I've just heard about this from a friend of mine, is that they will go into their bedroom and they will get the strip plug-ins, and they'll plug in one wire to the strip plug-in. They'll plug it into one receptacle, and then they'll run 2 space heaters, or you know, or a TV, and all of this stuff off of one outlet strip that's got like maybe, you know, 5 or 6 different plug-ins on it, and not understanding that those things are like you're plugging all of that equipment into one outlet, and they're only rated at the most for 15, or at the least. Most of them now are rated for like 15 amps maximum, and one little tiny electric heater at 1,500 watts is pulling about 13 to 14 amps all by itself. And this lady that my friend was dealing with, I couldn't figure out how come the breakers kept tripping. And it was just, you know, people don't realize, because she kept thinking that, well, I've got this strip plugged into the one, it's just one thing plugged into this outlet, and it should not be tripping this breaker. Well, you know, it's just a good way to burn your house down, is what it's going to, because it creates too much heat. People just need to have a little common sense. Is not common anymore, it seems, you know.
Well, since you've mentioned this, on our kitchen counter, I've noticed after about 12 years that some of the receptacles, and they're they're rated at 15. Some are rated, they originally were rated at 15 amps. They're the ones that cost 39 cents. You get 10 of them for $3.90. They call them a contractor pack. Lowe's sells them. Home Depot sells them. And we bought Cooper brand because I happen to like them the best at the time. And what I've noticed is, you know, some of the appliances, when you plug them in, that's when they power up. There's no on-off switch on all appliances that are on the counter. So some of them power up, and they make this arc, and they actually corrode the contacts within the receptacle themselves. So I've been replacing the 15 amp receptacles on the kitchen counter with 20 amp because they are more of an industrial type receptacle, and they'll last longer. They have an extra little slot in the where the prongs of your plug go. So you may want to consider that, class, you know, upgrading if you feel that when you plug in your toaster it's a little bit gritty. It doesn't, the connection's not really tight, because a loose connection tends to become a hot connection, which can tend to cause a fire inside your receptacle box. So be careful of that, and I'd recommend that you when you plug the plugs for your appliances into outlets, that if it feels loose, you're going to want to replace that. And you can find plenty of YouTube videos that'll tell you how to do it. I'm looking at a screen that says, you know, how much does it cost to install an electrical outlet in the kitchen? They show this guy, and it says $20 to $100. Really? I'm thinking like 50 cents. But
yeah. Yep. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Vince. I just had an opportunity to find out the other day. We have a little Mantis tiller that I'm getting ready to start firing up to use, and so I called the repair shop down here because the little carburetors that are on these things, even though I use nothing but premium non-ethanol gasoline, and I put in additive called Seafoam at 1 ounce per gallon. I've had this, it's an '03 model little Mantis tiller, and so it's 14 years old, you know. But the carburetor is not rebuildable.
Right.
Somehow, even with that, the little brass channels in there corroded, and even that, with all of the preparation that I did of running gas out of it or leaving, if I left it in there, it had a additive in it to keep the water out and those kind of things. It still got enough water in there over 14 years to corrode the inside of it and ruin the carburetor. Well, they wanted about $120 to replace this little carburetor. But I went on at my daughter's house. I don't have internet, but I went over to my daughter's house, and sure enough, I could buy this carburetor with the new hoses, with a new filter and everything, free shipping for $15.98, and just replace it myself. You know, it's just that's amazing.
Right. That's because you upgraded for the hoses. Now, if you didn't buy the hoses, it's $10.09.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know,
I'm looking right at it. I'm looking at eBay, right at it. $10.09 free shipping, and that's with the USA shipper. Now, if you want to get it from China and you're willing to wait a couple more weeks, maybe 3 weeks, you can get it for maybe even less. And I'm with you because we have some chainsaws. We have some Husqvarna chainsaws. We have a Steel brand chainsaw, and you know, same thing happened to the carburetors. So and we pick some up at garage sales. You know, guys will sell them for $25 for a small, pruning chainsaw. So for $25, it makes sense to get a steel saw because the carburetor doesn't work. For $10, we get a carburetor and we're in business. I mean, that's less than the price of the chain on the chainsaw. You know,
yeah.
So we're with you, and yes, you can do that. And you go to eBay class and you can buy them. Just type in the name of the item that you want, and then put the word carburetor in there, and then look at them and look at lots of pictures of them. Make sure the picture matches what you're trying to replace, and it's just a couple screws to put it in. I mean, you're looking at maybe 10 minutes. That's if you've never done it before.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it's interesting you mentioned chainsaws, Vince. About 6 years ago, I went to a garage sale, and an old boy had just put a brand new chain on this Poulin Pro chainsaw that he had. That was a 20-inch bar, nice looking saw and everything, and it wouldn't start. Couldn't get it started. He said, "I can't get it started for nothing." And so I said, "Well, how much you want for it?" And he said, "Well, man, I just put a new chain on there." He said, I got to get $5 out of it at least. And I said,
"Wow."
Okay. I kid you not. The chain was more, the chain's $20. So
Easily.
Anyway, I bought it for $5, took it home, took the carburetor apart out of there, just the outside of the carburetor, because a lot of times you'll get things that are, just kind of gummed up in there. And I took a little bit of I'm talking a half a second squirt of carburetor cleaner and sprayed it into the gas in the gas tank, and I sprayed the inside of the carburetor out just from the outside. And this is no joke. So I pulled it about 10 times. It didn't start. And so I just let it sit overnight. And I came back the next morning. I pulled the plug out, and sure enough, the plug was a little bit dirty because I didn't quite. I just forgot about that because the guy said the carburetor was in bad shape. I cleaned it up, cleaned the carburetor, the little plug off. It wasn't bad. It should have ran, but it was kind of carboned up from too much fuel, kind of thing. And so anyway, I cleaned it all off and everything. I pulled that about probably another 10 times, and all of a sudden it started to want to come to life. So I pushed the choke in, and that thing fired up, and I've been using that for literally at least, I think it's like 6 or 7 years I've been using that same chainsaw, and literally it cost me a little bit of carburetor cleaner and $5.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
Yeah.
So I was driving, you and I don't spend a lot on vehicles. $3,000 seems to be my upper limit. And so I bought a used Chevy pickup truck, a 2004 for $3,000. Full-size bed, and I bought a used Mercedes 1996. with a diesel engine in it. It gets between 30 miles to the gallon in the city and 47 on the highway. And I was traveling with it a few days ago, and this tractor trailer hits a bump, and I'm way behind it, but just perfect timing. Stone hits the windshield, puts a chip in the windshield. So what do? I'll tell you when we come back. So to continue with the story about the cracked windshield or the chipped windshield, I found this car, this 1996 Mercedes, and I thought we should buy it for our family. But I don't surprise Mrs. Finelli or anybody else in the family. I say, hey, guess what we just got? Guess what I just spent your money on and my money on? I don't do that. So I brought Mrs. Finelli to go look at it. But I thought that this Mercedes had, I remember from the day before when I looked at it, that it had a chip in the windshield a little smaller than a quarter. So before I went to show it to the family, I called the glass place, and I said, so what would it cost for a windshield? I was over $300. I'm thinking $3,000 for the car, $300 for the windshield, 10% of the cost of this is going to be added on for the windshield. And, I can get the whole rest of the car, the engine, the transmission, the wheels, the tires, the body, the seats, for $3,000. It seemed like it was out of proportion for a windshield. Actually, it was well over $300. So I said, what does it cost to fix one of these, little star cracks in the windshield? The guy said, well, if a quarter will fit over it, we can do it, and it'll be $75. And I thought, that's a lot of money. So I went on the internet, and I found that I could, for about $7, I could get a windshield repair kit. But I didn't realize that you can fix a whole bunch of little chips with the same kit if you're really careful and judicious how you cut the tube open and put the cap on properly. So I fixed it, and I got this kit, and it was, one of the, not the basic kit, but a little bit more deluxe. So it was about $7, and I fixed the windshield. And then a couple of days ago, bang, another rock hits it, and I said to Mrs. Finelli, she was in the car, I said, well, when we get home, I got to fix this. So I took out one of those map-type pins and cleaned out the little debris, and I said, I got to fix this before moisture gets in there and this thing spreads. And so I used the same kit that I had before, and I fixed it again. So what I'm saying is, and I have a spare now. I have a spare in my toolbox, but I only paid $3.55 for the spare kit. So you can do these things yourself. And what does it take? Well, it takes, 5 minutes, and you have to have a sunny day because the sun cures the resin that you're going to apply to your windshield ding, and then you take a razor blade that comes with the kit, and you scrape it smooth, and now, can you see it? Yes. Yes, you can see it. But looking at that versus keeping $300 in my wallet, I'm going to keep the $300 plus in my wallet. Kyle, any thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Vince, one time I was talking to an old friend of mine, and he would buy and sell little trailers. And he said, one time a friend of mine come to me, he says, and why don't you buy a Dodge Diesel, one of them real nice, big, fancy ones? He says, you got plenty of money. And he says, well, you know where all that $50,000 is that I have to use to get that Dodge Diesel? And he said, no, where? He says, in my back pocket, It's just a matter of he drove an old Ford Diesel and pulled everything with that. And he says, that $50,000 is in my back pocket. And so, it's just a matter of, it depends on how much a person is led by advertising and how having to keep up with the Joneses or how everything looks. I was at an auction. This just happened 2 weeks ago. I was at an auction, and there was a 99 Subaru there, and it was covered in overspray like it had been trailered in there. And so I asked the auctioneer before he had a bidding on it, how come it had been trailered in? And he said, well, it needs an idle air control mixture valve. And I said, okay. But the guy said, well, the guy that has this car had put new head gaskets on it, new tires on it, new clutch in it. And so I got around there and checked everything. Sure enough, you could see the little edge of the head gasket looked brand new. The tires looked brand new. The clutch was catching and starting to release at the very bottom, which tells you that there's a lot of clutch left in there. So I tended to believe him. But because of this overspray on this car, I bought that car, Vince, for $550, and it does not have. And you know what? It takes about 20 times to get it started. Trying to start it, but I started that thing at the auction and drove it home.
Wow, excellent. Good deal. So, class, you can be a little thrifty, and it's okay. And you can keep that extra money in your wallet and use it for other purposes. Or you can not have that extra money in your wallet and not work so hard to earn it and pay taxes on it. So, Kyle, I love broadcasting with you. I love your insight and the sharing that you're willing to provide for our class. Thank you so much. Next time, let's talk about GFIC outlets. Next time you're on with me, I'll talk about why they're important.
You bet.
Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.